The night they moved in, Rachel woke up to the sound of footsteps pacing across the attic. The family had only been asleep for 3 hours. Her husband, David, mumbled that it was probably the old pipes, but she knew that sound, measured, deliberate, almost human. The clock read 3:12 a.m. The house felt heavier, as if something unseen was listening. Rachel crept to Lily's room. Her daughter was sitting upright in bed, whispering to someone who wasn't there. "He says we don't belong here," Lily murmured. Rachel froze. The air smelled faintly of wet earth. Downstairs, a door creaked open by itself. She hadn't even noticed that it was locked earlier. Would you still call it home if the house whispered your name? Morning came soft and silent, but the air still felt wrong. Rachel made coffee while David checked the fuse box, pretending last night hadn't happened. Lily sat at the table, drawing the house with charcoal. Except in her version, the attic window was blacked out and dripping. Rachel asked about it, and Lily only shrugged. "That's how it looks at night," she said. When Rachel went to unpack, she found the same drawing pinned to the back of the basement door, even though no one had gone down there yet. By the third day, Rachel started noticing things missing. Her hairbrush, a photo of her parents, one of Lily's shoes. The kind of things that make you question your memory before your sanity. David dismissed it, muttering something about the movers. But that night, as Rachel folded laundry, she found the missing shoe under their bed, soaked in mud. The carpet beneath it felt damp. She followed the wet trail to the window, which was locked from the inside. Her reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, smiling when she wasn't. The house made strange sounds when no one moved. Pacing, whispering, a low hum that seemed to come from beneath the floor. Rachel pressed her ear to the wall, hearing faint laughter, distant but deliberate. When she called for Lily, no one answered. She found her daughter upstairs in the attic doorway, staring at something unseen in the darkness. "Mom, they're asking where Dad sleeps," Lily said, voice flat. Behind her, the attic light flickered twice. The air smelled of soil and rot. Rachel pulled her back and shut the door, but the laughter didn't stop. That evening, David tried to reassure Rachel, insisting the house just needed time to settle. He poured her a glass of wine, saying she looked tired, that maybe she was overthinking again. But his hands trembled when he said it. He hadn't told her what he found earlier. The basement door had been wide open, and the light inside wouldn't turn off no matter how many times he flipped the switch. As they sat together in forced silence, the lights dimmed on their own. A single knock echoed through the house. Then another. Then a whisper from the basement. "We've been waiting." Rachel stopped sleeping. The house never really went quiet. It just waited. The soft scraping behind the walls grew louder every night, matching her heartbeat. When she tried to record it on her phone, the playback was blank. No sound, just heavy static and her own breathing. David's patience wore thin, blaming her for scaring Lily. But Rachel noticed something he didn't. Every time they argued, the lights flickered in rhythm with her anger, as if the house itself was eavesdropping. One night, the attic light turned on by itself, and stayed that way until dawn. Lily began leaving her drawings on the fridge, all of them of the same thing. Their house, surrounded by dark, faceless figures. Rachel asked about them, but Lily only said, "They come from the floor." When Rachel went to check, she found the basement carpet damp again, as if something had breathed against it. The smell was stronger now, earthy and metallic. That night, David found her on her knees near the vent, whispering, "I can hear them talking." He didn't hear anything. Not yet. David tried to keep things normal. Family dinners, jokes about the haunted house, but the laughter never reached his eyes. He was hiding something. Rachel saw it in the way he looked at the basement door, always checking the lock twice. She asked why he'd chosen this house, and he avoided the question. Later that night, she searched his office and found an old property file. The name of the previous owner was blacked out, Only one note remained. Unresolved incident. Do not disclose to client. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Then she heard a knock behind her. When she turned, no one was there. Rachel confronted David the next morning. He denied everything, insisting the file was just old paperwork. But his voice cracked, his hands shaking when he poured his coffee. Lily watched them silently, her spoon resting in midair. Suddenly, a loud thud came from upstairs, heavy and deliberate, like something falling. When they ran to check, they found the attic door wide open again. Inside, the air was freezing. On the floor, written in dust, were 2 words, "Still here." That night, Rachel dreamed she was buried alive beneath the house. She could hear footsteps and voices above her, David calling her name, Lily crying. But she couldn't scream. When she woke, she was lying on the basement floor, her nightgown smeared with dirt. She didn't remember going there. The bulb above flickered dimly, revealing handprints on the wall, small ones, like a child's, pressed deep into the concrete. As she backed away, one of the prints seemed to shift, dragging slowly downward, as if something unseen was still pushing from the other side. Rachel couldn't stop thinking about the handprints. She scrubbed the wall until her fingers bled, but the stains wouldn't fade. The smell of soil clung to her skin no matter how long she washed. David told her to rest, but she couldn't. Something was buried here. She could feel it. That night, she followed a trail of wet footprints from the kitchen to the basement door. They stopped halfway down the stairs, as if whoever made them had vanished mid-step. Whoa, the light flickered, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw her own face staring back at her from the bottom of the stairs, whispering her name. The next morning, David found blood on the kitchen tiles, a single streak that led toward the basement door. He called for Rachel, but she didn't answer. Lily sat at the table, staring at the red mark. "It's not hers," she said softly. Her voice sounded far too calm. David knelt down, trying to clean it. But when he wiped the floor, the blood smeared upward, against gravity, tracing a handprint onto the cupboard door. He dropped the cloth, staring at the wall as the light above began to flicker violently. David finally called the police. The responding officer searched every room but found nothing unusual. No forced entry, no footprints, no blood. Everything had somehow reset. The officer warned David about stress reactions and left, but Rachel didn't return. That night, David sat at the dining table alone, drinking in the dark. Upstairs, Lily whispered to someone again. When he went to check, she was asleep, but her phone screen glowed faintly. On it was a recording of Rachel's voice saying, "Don't open the floor." David awoke to the sound of dripping. At first, he thought it was rain, until he realized it was coming from the ceiling. He climbed a chair and touched the damp spot. Thick, dark, and metallic. Blood. It dripped slowly, forming a small pool on the table below. His pulse pounded in his ears as he went to the attic. The stench hit him first. Rot and something sweet. In the center of the floor was Rachel's wedding ring, half buried in fresh dirt. He called her name again and again, but the only answer was a low hum, vibrating through the wooden beams, almost like a voice humming her name back. When David came back down, Lily was waiting in the hallway, holding her mother's scarf. "She said not to go up there," she whispered. Her hands were shaking, eyes red from crying. He tried to comfort her, but she stepped back. "Dad," she said, "the house doesn't want you anymore." Then the power went out. Total darkness swallowed them. For a few seconds, David could hear breathing right behind him, but when he turned, no one was there. When the lights flickered back, Lily was gone. Detective Harold Shaw had seen plenty of bad scenes in 20 years, but nothing like this. The Myers house was spotless, unnaturally so. No trace of blood, no signs of struggle. Just silence and a faint scent of bleach. David sat at the table, shaking, insisting his wife and daughter had vanished overnight. Shaw noted his trembling hands, his flat voice. "People don't just disappear," he said. David stared back, eyes hollow. "In this house, they do." Upstairs, the detective heard faint tapping like fingernails against wood. But when he looked, nothing was there. The detective photographed every corner. His camera flash revealed details the naked eye missed. Faint outlines of small handprints on the basement wall. A shadow in the attic that shifted position between shots. He chalked it up to nerves or maybe fatigue. But then he noticed something impossible. A set of footprints leading up the attic stairs, stopping halfway, as if the person had vanished mid-step. He touched the wood and felt warmth, like skin. He quickly withdrew his hand. Something in the air moved. A slow exhale, as if the house itself was breathing. Later, Shaw interviewed David in the living room. The man's story kept changing. First, Rachel was sleepwalking. Then she ran off. Then, the house took her. Shaw tried to stay calm, jotting notes, but the words blurred on the page. The temperature dropped without warning. David began to shiver, muttering, "It's listening." Shaw turned off his recorder and listened. Faint static buzzed through the room, followed by a whisper that didn't belong to either of them. It said his name. Shaw went over the property records that night at the station. The file was thin, too thin. The previous owners, the Haskins family, vanished in 1992. No bodies, no evidence, no suspects. The same real estate agency had sold the house back then to David's agency. David's agency. Shaw froze at the note scribbled in the margin. Buyer's wife reported voices under the floor. He replayed David's confession in his mind, his voice trembling. "It's my fault. I brought us here." Shaw rubbed his temples. For the first time in his career, he wasn't sure this was a case police could solve. Shaw returned to the house at midnight. He couldn't explain why. Something in the air pulled him back. The front door was unlocked, swaying slightly as if breathing in the wind. The house was silent but not empty. His flashlight flickered the moment he crossed the threshold. He heard a child's laugh from upstairs. "Lily," he called softly. No answer. He climbed the stairs, each creak echoing too long. When he reached the top, he saw muddy footprints leading down the hall. Smaller than Rachel's, smaller than David's, and still wet. Detective Shaw returned to the house at dawn with 2 officers. The air felt heavier, like walking into a sealed room. Every photo on the walls had changed. The faces were blurred, twisted, as if caught mid-scream. In the living room, the wallpaper peeled in vertical strips, revealing dark stains beneath. One of the officers gagged. Shaw knelt, running his fingers across the stain. It wasn't blood. It was mold shaped like human hands. He glanced toward the ceiling. Above, the faint sound of humming returned, the same tune from the recordings David mentioned. Shaw felt his stomach drop. The song was Rachel's voice. Shaw brought in a forensics team, but their instruments malfunctioned one by one. Batteries drained. Audio recorders filled with static. And every photo taken of the attic turned out completely black. "The house doesn't want to be seen," one tech muttered. Shaw dismissed it, though his hands were shaking. Later, alone, he examined Rachel's ring in an evidence bag. He swore it was still damp. He opened the file again and noticed something new. An extra photo he didn't remember seeing before. It showed the attic, empty, except for a faint outline of 3 figures standing together. Smiling, Shaw visited David again, now held overnight at the station for questioning. David barely recognized him. Pale, eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. "They're in the walls," he whispered. "I can hear them moving." Shaw leaned closer. But David's expression changed suddenly, going blank. Then he began humming the same tune Rachel had sung. The detective's breath caught. "Where did you learn that?" Shaw asked. David smiled faintly. "She taught me last night," His voice broke. "She's still upstairs." Unable to ignore it, Shaw returned to the Myers house one last time. The air felt colder than before. He carried a small recorder and whispered notes into it. The static on playback formed words. "Look under." He froze, then followed the voice to the living room floorboards. They were newly nailed, the wood slightly discolored. He pried one up with his knife. Beneath the boards lay a layer of wet soil. And something else. A lock of blonde hair, still attached to skin. He stumbled back, gagging. Then, faintly, he heard a child laughing again. Closer this time. Shaw brought in the soil sample for analysis, but the lab results only deepened the mystery. The composition matched human remains, mixed with ash, decades old. He called the property registry, demanding information on the original deed. The clerk on the line hesitated. "Detective, that house was condemned in 1994, she said. It shouldn't even exist." Shaw stared at the Myers address, his pulse racing. Outside the window, rain began to fall. But when he looked closer, the droplets on the glass were red. Detective Shaw couldn't stop thinking about what the clerk said. The house was condemned, yet he'd walked through it days ago. He returned once more, alone, telling himself it was just for confirmation. But the house looked different this time. Walls darker, ceilings lower, furniture rearranged as though mocking his memory. The air felt wrong, too still. His flashlight caught movement down the hall, a fleeting glimpse of a blonde woman turning the corner. "Mrs. Myers," he called out. His own voice came back distorted, whispered twice in reply. "You're late." Shaw followed the sound of footsteps into the living room. Every object had been moved again, the furniture rearranged into a perfect circle around the exposed floorboards. In the center, his flashlight landed on a photo. It was him, standing in the room today from an angle he couldn't have seen. He dropped it, heart hammering. Behind him, the floor creaked, and a soft voice whispered his name. He spun around. Nothing, just his reflection in the mirror, staring back. Except it was smiling. The whispers became words now, threading through the air. "You opened it," they said. "You let us out." Shaw pressed his palms to his ears, trembling. The temperature dropped suddenly, his breath visible in the dark. The walls pulsed, a slow, steady rhythm like a heartbeat. Then, from the staircase, a small figure appeared. Lily Myers, barefoot, eyes hollow. She looked at him and smiled faintly. "She wants to show you," the girl said. "She's downstairs." Shaw's legs moved on their own. He descended into the basement, each step heavier than the last. The smell hit him, rot and damp soil. His flashlight flickered, showing fragments. Rachel's scarf on the ground, the muddy shoe from Lily's room, and the ring again, glinting in the dirt. Then he saw her. Rachel, standing at the far wall, eyes open, face blank. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Now it remembers you." The light went out. In the dark, the sound of breathing surrounded him. Dozens of voices inhaling as one. When Shaw awoke, he was lying on the floor outside the house, the door wide open behind him. Dawn had broken, birds chirping faintly. Too normal, too bright. His clothes were damp with dirt, and Rachel's ring was clenched in his fist. He staggered to his car, breathing hard. The house looked peaceful again, like it always had. But as he started the engine, the radio came to life on its own. Static filled the car, followed by a child's voice whispering, "You can't leave yet." Then faintly, through the static, came the sound of his own voice whispering back. Detective Shaw couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Rachel's voice, calm, patient, calling him back. He told himself it was trauma, but part of him wanted to return. He reviewed his notes again, timestamps that didn't exist, recordings that played backward, and one new entry he didn't remember writing. It read, "She's waiting for you at home." He froze. His hands were shaking as he realized the handwriting wasn't his. The pen was still moving by itself, finishing the sentence, "You never left." Shaw drove back to the Myers house before dawn. But when he reached the property line, his headlights illuminated nothing. No house, just an empty field. The GPS still read the same address, and yet the road ended in grass and fog. He stepped out, heart pounding, staring at the open space where the house had been. Then, faintly through the mist, he saw the shape, the outline of walls forming, flickering in and out, like the house was breathing itself back into existence. From somewhere inside the fog came Lily's laughter, echoing like wind chimes. He stepped forward, through the fog, and found himself in the foyer again. The house was whole, solid, silent, and waiting. The front door closed behind him on its own. His flashlight flickered out. In the darkness, the voices returned. Rachel's, Lily's, and David's, whispering in unison. "You belong here." He stumbled toward the living room, shouting for them to stop. The air felt thick, electric. The walls trembled. Then, suddenly, the floor opened beneath him, revealing a dark, breathing void that sounded eerily like the ocean. Shaw fell, or thought he did. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the living room. Daylight streaming in, the sound of birds outside. The house looked clean, new, untouched. His clothes were dry, his hands unmarked. On the couch sat a smiling real estate agent, clipboard in hand. "Welcome to your new home, Mr. Shaw," she said brightly. He tried to speak, but no sound came. Behind her, a family photo hung on the wall. A man, woman, and young girl standing in front of the house. The man was him. They say no one ever moved into that house again. At least, not officially. Locals pass by the empty lot and swear they still see light in the windows, hear laughter, smell wet earth after rain. Some claim to have seen a man in the window, still wearing a detective's coat, watching. They say the house rebuilds itself for whoever needs to hide something. Maybe it isn't cursed at all. Maybe it's hungry. Maybe it just waits for the next family to call it home. Would you still trust your dream house after this?